I'm not much of a fisherman, but I do occasionally go fishing, as I have a lot of friends who really enjoy fishing. Here in California, the striped bass, also known as striper, is a very popular fish to catch. One of the best places to catch them is at the San Luis Reservoir, located west of Los Baños on the Highway 152. Most of you that have gone to Gilroy, Santa Cruz, or San Jose may have passed by this lake before. At the San Luis Reservoir, there are two lakes. The actual San Luis Reservoir, also known as the Big Lake, and the O'Neill Forebay, also known as the Small Lake. Most of the time, the easiest way to catch striper is to soak bait or use worms and anchovies as bait. You'd cast them out as far as you can and wait for the fish to come and eat the bait. But for a short window of the year, in the small lake, the striper will come closer to the shore to feed on the bait fish. During this time, my friends would wear water suits and actually get into the water and go out waist deep, or about 15 to 20 yards out from shore to find fish. If you find the school of fish, you will catch your limit within an hour. So, like I mentioned, I'm not a hardcore fisherman, but my friends told me about this unbelievable fishing experience, and I had to go and see it for myself. At first, I was very cautious about getting into the water. Some areas of this lake is very deep, but there are certain areas where you can go out very far from shore and the water will only be about waist deep. After I started catching fish though, all of my irrational fears, or so I thought, went away. I was instantly hooked. I went from going fishing maybe a few times a year to going fishing almost every other day during this bite. During this season, the seaweed grows pretty high, so your bait will get tangled in the seaweed about every 3 to 4 casts. You just have to reel in your lure, remove the seaweed, and continue fishing. I forgot to mention that this style of fishing is only good once the sun goes down. So you're fishing in almost complete darkness with only the moon as your main source of light and the headlamp as a backup for when you need to tie your lure or remove stubborn seaweed. 3 weeks into fishing, I planned a fishing trip with some friends. Originally, there was supposed to be 4 of us who were going to fish at night, but 2 of my friends bailed out. Now, it was just only going to be me and another friend. Let's call him Mike. Up until this point, I had never fished with less than 2 others with me. But I had figured that I had gone so many times before without any issues that this time will be just like other times. Plus, Mike had never done this style of fishing before, so he was excited and we just decided to go and fish with just the 2 of us. As usual, we arrived at the spot and got ready. I told Mike about the seaweed and the depth and assured him that he would be okay if he just followed me. We got into the water and by this time, the sun was just about gone. I could tell that Mike was a little uneasy, as to be expected. But after about 5 minutes, Mike hooked on to his first fish. From then on, I could see that Mike had forgotten about any fears that he had. We were having a great time and hooking up a lot of fish. So much so that we had released most of them. On this particular night, the moon was very small, so there was barely enough light to see Mike standing 5 to 6 feet to my right. About 2 hours into fishing, I could see him start to move further and further away from me. I figured, hey, he's getting comfortable. Then I saw Mike turn on his headlamp and walk back slowly towards me. As he approached me, he said calmly, "Hey bro, the fishing here is not that good. Let's try another spot." To which I replied, "What? You're crazy. The fish are all over." He said, "Come on, let's go to another spot. We'll come back." I could see in his eyes that he was trying to tell me something without actually telling me. So we both make our way back to the shore. We get out of our gear, pack our things, and proceeded towards another spot. That's when Mike tells me that he's had enough fishing for the night and is ready to go. At this point, we had both already caught our limit of fish and were just catching and releasing anyhow, so we exited the lake and headed home. The whole entire ride, I could tell something was off about Mike. On our way to the lake, he had been so talkative, but now he had hardly said a word. Conversations were short, and I just figured that he was probably tired. About 2 weeks later, I hear that Mike wasn't doing too well, and they were going to do a jingle bell for him, so I headed over to his place. When I got there, I noticed that Mike looked very frail and pale. I asked him if he was okay, and he just looked at me. A little confused, I asked around and my friends told me that Mike had been having trouble sleeping and have had very bad dreams. When the shaman finished his ritual, he sat down with Mike and his parents. All the guests were also nearby, waiting to hear what the shaman had to say. He asked Mike if he had gone near a large body of water recently. That's when Mike told everyone about what had happened that night when we went night fishing. He said that while we were fishing, he heard splashing like there was a feeding frenzy. When he moved away from me, he was moving towards the sound of splashing, hoping to catch a big fish. After a few casts, he got stuck to some seaweed, and when he reeled in his lure to untangle the seaweed, he noticed that the texture of the seaweed felt different from all the other times. So he turned on his headlamp. To his surprise, it was long black hair that was stuck to his lure, not seaweed. He cut his lure off, and that's when he made his way back to where I was, and we headed home. When Mike got home later, after that night of fishing, he started to have weird dreams. He dreamt that he was underwater and couldn't get out. He said that every time he'd dream, it was always the same reoccurring dream. It was so bad that he swore he was choking on water and would wake up. Even his hands and fingers were wrinkled, like when you're in the water for too long. The shaman said that night, something lured Mike away from me to make him vulnerable. It was stuck in the water and needed someone to take its place, and because we were in the water, it was able to reach Mike. It said that the thing had been there for a long time, and because most people fish from the shore, it wasn't able to get to them. But Mike threw his lure directly to where it was at. Plus, Mike was in its territory, so that was how it was able to get to him. The following weekend, Mike's parents hired a stronger shaman to heal him and change his name. He's been fine ever since, but we no longer go and fish in that area anymore. Mike has given up fishing altogether. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. Early one morning back in Laos, not too long ago, but a Hmong grandpa and a 4-year-old grandson went out to their family's garden. This garden was located a couple of miles away from their village. That day, they had to go and check up on some of the grandpa's cows to make sure that no predators had gotten to them and that they haven't gotten sick. The grandpa and his grandson had arrived at the location first before the rest of the family because the grandpa was anxious to check up on his newborn bull. Every possible thing seemed to be fine so far, and it's a good early start for the day. All of the meals were pretty much very well alive and calmly active. The grandpa and his grandson then went into a little shed built at one corner of their garden to have breakfast and wait for the other family members to show up before getting work started on the farm. The two settled in, and the grandpa had just started unwrapping the food that he packed earlier that morning, when all of a sudden, all the cows started mooing and shaking the ground with their stomps. The grandpa, afraid that it might be a tiger, ran outside to see all of his cattle huddled up into one corner of their little field. this is when the strange stuff occurred. The grandpa saw the tiger, but the tiger didn't hurt any of his cows. The beast just turned around after cornering all the cows and took off running back into the forest. No matter what, the grandpa's instincts kicked in and he got really frightened all of a sudden. He was scared that the beast might come after him next and his grandson, so he went inside the tiny shed and hurried, locking the door the best way he knew how. He then turned around to his grandson, but the grandson was nowhere in sight in that small room. Afraid that the boy had followed him outside, and maybe that he locked him out, the grandpa hurried back outside, screaming for his grandson, but there was no answer. He then looked everywhere for the boy, but there was no sign of him at all. When the other family members finally caught up, they were terrified and shocked to hear about the bad news. Despite the help of the villagers, the little boy had disappeared for 1 whole week with no trace. This was until a shaman lady had come from another village to help the family. After she performed her rituals for a little bit, she told them that the boy is not too far from their village and that he's alive. She recommended that they have about 20 or more men with dogs to go and find that boy in a particular spot, and so the family and the village set out on this journey. The boy was easily found under a big fallen log. The place was clear of leaves and twigs, unlike the rest of the forest, and the ground below the log seemed like someone dug it out a bit just to make it perfect enough for him to hide in. After the harsh incident and the happy reunion, they questioned the boy where he has been and how he got underneath the log and where they found him. He said that when his grandpa stepped outside, he saw that his grandma came in. His grandma put a leaf in front of him when his grandpa came inside and locked the door. But then his grandpa opened the door and went back outside again. This was when his grandma said, "Come on, son, follow me this way." And so the boy did. When he followed his grandma outside, he saw his grandpa running around and looking for something. But his grandma kept on telling him to follow her, and so he did. He followed her deeper and deeper into the forest, where he could no longer see his grandpa in the garden site. Then there were other people ahead of him in the forest, sitting around and playing and laughing. When they got there where the other people were, he could no longer see his grandma. The parents asked him how did these people look like, and he said that they were a lot smaller than real people, and they have a lot of hair, and their eyes were sideways. The parents knew exactly what these people were. They then asked him what kind of food these people fed him and why he was left alone under that big log. He responded, "They fed me crabs, snails, worms, and sometimes they'd go and steal rice from other people's houses and bring it to me to eat. They are very nice people. You guys came to their house to get me. You didn't even see them, but they were all making fun of you guys, and then they were saying goodbye to me as you guys carried me away back home." Afterwards, the family had to do a big shaman ceremony and change the boy's name just in case the people came back looking for him. They also tied a red string around his left ankle to make him invisible to those creatures. June was only 20 years old and lived a happy, healthy life with her family. Her boyfriend, Dua, was from Canada. By the way, June and her family had bought a beautiful home up on the mountains of Southern California. They haven't lived there for long when June heard and saw weird things. But being Christians, they didn't believe in such things. One day, while home alone, washing the dishes, she heard somebody calling her name. Without turning around, she yelled back, "What is it?" She turned around and there was nobody there. She didn't think too much of it. She and her boyfriend were always talking about getting married, but had never gotten around to proposing or being engaged. It was only until one Christmas that they gave each other a promise ring. A month later, June got really sick. She couldn't get out of bed. They admitted her to the hospital. The doctors found nothing wrong with her. The boyfriend went to spend some time with the family. While there, he heard weird things and saw strange shadows and blurs running past the guest bed of his girlfriend's bedroom. He went to check up on her and saw nothing. A week after he went home, she was again admitted to the hospital. It only took a few days afterwards, then she passed away. It happened so fast, too soon. Dua was told of the death and was ready to fly out to see his dead girlfriend, but his mom wouldn't allow him at all. His mom was a shaman, and she said that it was not a good thing for him to do so. But his grandparents were Christians, and they would belittle Dua's mom, saying that such things doesn't matter and that they don't exist. Dua told them that he would die for her and that he couldn't live without her. His paternal grandmother took him aside and told him if he loved her that much, they will allow him to go and see her. Somehow, his grandmother had given him a ring a long time ago to save for his future wife. His mom finally gave in and let him go. When he got to the church, he took June's hand and placed the ring on her finger. It was about a month later. Dua was riding his motorcycle down the 99 in broad daylight when a raven flew right into his sight. According to other motorists, he crashed and passed away. But for some reason, they couldn't find that raven that flew into him. His mom did a jingle bell and found out that his girlfriend had come to take him. I knew both of these people. The weird thing is that when they were both still alive and chatting away with me, they did promise each other that they would come for one another and joke with me that if they should go first before me, they will come and tell me how life after death is. For both of their funerals, I wasn't able to attend. After their passing, I would get sick very quick and at times severely ill. My mood would change to the point that I thought I was going insane. I had crazy dreams and would see strange things. A year after, one day after doing the jingle bell to fix a relative, the shaman guy who I never met, nor my family had ever met, approached my parents and told me to come and sit down for a bit with him. He stared at me for a bit and asked me if I knew of a girl that passed away recently. I nodded. This was when he revealed that she was there with me. My parents were shocked. He told me that the more I let her visit me, the sooner I will go with them. He said that during her funeral, June was looking for me. My younger brother is very sensitive to the spirit world. When we were kids, my aunt gave my sister and I each a beautiful doll dressed completely in traditional Hmong costumes. They even had money bags with beads on them. Well, my brother was about 8 or 9 at the time. We were upstairs in our bedroom facing him and talking to him. The dolls were on the desk. All of a sudden, he freaked out and started screaming. He said that he saw the dolls blink with their eyes. They rotated a full 360 degrees in their stands. He would never go close to them after that. He was too frightened every time he saw them. This would scare the crap out of us all. My mom decided to put them somewhere else where we wouldn't see them. A few years later, after searching for junk down in the basement, I came across the dolls. Still terrified of what my brother saw, I decided to cover them back up. I'm not sure if my mom threw them away or now if they're still in the house somewhere. The thing is that my brother is 21 years old now, and he still reports weird noises and people talking in his room at night, as well as footsteps in the house. Nobody else sees or hears anything except for him. Back in Laos, sometimes in the 1970s, my 2 uncles went hunting at night. The forest that they went into was at the edge of the village. My older uncle and the younger one were walking along a path when they heard something in the trees. They had flashlights and flashed at it, and they saw a creature that looks like an Asian raccoon. The older brother shot at it and it fell down. When my 2 uncles got there, where the animal fell, they couldn't find it at all. They didn't think much of it, thinking that they had missed it. The two of them went most of the night hunting and came back early in the morning. As they were walking on the path back home, they came upon the animal that they had shot. Its corpse was lying on the path, so the two of them brought it home and ate it. A few days later, they went to the garden, and the older brother was in the lead, and the younger brother followed. All of a sudden, the older one fell dead right on the spot. After this, they did a funeral for my uncle, and he came in a dream to his grandma and told his grandma that he is alright. They took him to a different part of the forest about 30 miles away, and that he'll be back within a few years, and for his parents to stop crying.